Good afternoon, everybody. It is Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023. Welcome back to another episode of Big Blue Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Volz, a freshman here at SUNY Fredonia. Got a good show planned for you today. Of course, going to start off talking about Fredonia sports, but then I want to get to recapping last Thursday night's NFL draft, well, Thursday night being the first round, the NFL draft, and just look at who the Bills picked and just my thoughts on their picks as well as other things that happened around the league. And then, of course, I want to talk about the NHL and NBA playoffs as well as the Major League Baseball season. But starting with Fredonia sports, the women's lacrosse season has recently come to an end. They finished the season at 6-11. Last Wednesday, actually, right after I got off the air, they played at SUNY Geneseo. A tough game to finish out the season. They ended up losing 19-2 in their season finale, but they finished the year at 6-11, 1-8 in conference play. They were 1-5 at home, 4-5 on the road, and 1-1 in neutral site games. And this was a team that I've mentioned on the show previously that the lacrosse team had won something to the effect of, I think it was 3 games in the last 4 years. So the fact that they were able to double that in just this one season is a pretty remarkable sign of positive things to come for the lacrosse team. And I did happen to notice that they got some very solid contributions from a lot of freshmen on their team as well. So definitely a lot of hope that the women's lacrosse team will just continue to keep getting better and better. And I would say a significant amount of optimism future-wise for that team as well. Now on to baseball. They played their last home series of the season, not actually at home. They played 3 games in 2 days against SUNY New Paltz on Friday and Saturday, and those games were supposed to be played here, but due to inclement weather and field conditions, the games were actually moved to Veterans Memorial Park down in Salamanca, which if anybody's never been down that way, it's about an hour east of Fredonia. Beautiful facility they've got down there. I actually called last year. I actually called a playoff football game at their stadium, and it's just a beautiful facility they got in there. Very, very new, modernized. They've got football, baseball, softball, and I think they've got a track back there too. So just it was a very nice venue. The Blue Devils ended up taking 1 out of the 3. They won on Friday. They beat New Paltz 9-6. And then the 2 Saturday games, both close. They lost 10-8 in the first game. It was a doubleheader on Saturday. And then the second game, they lost 13-7. So 3 games remaining for the Blue Devils. Their overall record is 6-25. They're 1-14 in conference play. They finished 1-5 at home, 1-12 on the road, 4-8 in neutral site games. And again, as you see a lot of times in spring sports, sometimes games get postponed, games get canceled, games get moved, and a lot of that is a result of, it rains in Western New York seemingly all month in March and April, and it's just absolutely wonderful to see that the rain and the not that warm weather has persisted into May. If you can sense my sarcasm, that's because I'm laying it on pretty thick. One more series left for the Blue Devils. They've got 3 games in 2 days at SUNY Plattsburgh this weekend, 3 o'clock on Friday, and then a doubleheader Saturday starting at noon with the second game slated to start probably right around 3 o'clock. So the overall record for this Blue Devils baseball team is 6-25. Again, 1-14 in conference play, and they've got 3 more chances to improve upon that record. For softball, they actually have had some results go their way recently. They just had a game last Thursday where everything was going right for the Blue Devils. They beat Oswego 15-2 last Thursday in the first half of a doubleheader. They've lost 3 since then. They lost the second half of that doubleheader 8-5. And then they were 0-2 last Friday in a doubleheader at Cortland, losing 5-0 and 4-3. 3 more doubleheaders left for the Blue Devil softball team, all at home. This Friday, a doubleheader against Oneonta starting at 3 o'clock. Saturday, a doubleheader against New Paltz starting at noon. And then they'll finish out the season with a doubleheader next Monday, May 8th at 3 o'clock against Penn State Behrend. The overall record for the softball team is 5-27. They're 4-10 in conference play, 1-9 at home, 3-7 on the road, and 1-11 in neutral site games. And now finally to track and field, their regular season has also come to an end. They just finished up. They had a meet last Saturday at St. John Fisher, and they actually had there were a handful of runners that recorded some personal bests, and I noticed that the last 3 meets, they had a handful of runners for both the men's and women's teams that had recorded some personal bests. They had a meet it was April 15th and 16th at Bucknell University. It's called the Bison Outdoor Classic. They had some select members of the team participate there, and it felt like seemingly all of them recorded personal bests. I mean, they had a fantastic day. They were at U of R on April 22nd, and again, some fantastic, U of R being the University of Rochester, I should clarify that, but they had, again, a handful of runners with personal bests, and they did the same thing last Saturday at St. John Fisher. So definitely a short regular season for this track and field team, again, both men's and women's, as it was only 5 meets. They had March 31st, they were at Slippery Rock, April 8th at RIT. A few weeks ago, they were at Bucknell, and a few select members participated there. Then April 22nd against U of R, and April 29th against St. John Fisher, and that's the regular season. SUNYAC championships are this weekend, though, for the track and field team, Friday and Saturday. Not sure what times they will be competing, but that event as a whole will be hosted by SUNY Oneonta. So that is a look at your Fredonia State overall sports teams and how everybody's doing as spring sports, and the entire spring semester really is starting to wind down to an end. I think that as the calendar turns to May, a lot of college students here at Fredonia kind of, the end is in sight. I guess there is light at the end of the tunnel. The semester is not too far from being over, as we just have a couple of weeks left. So that I'll take a quick break, and then when I come back, I'm going to talk about the Major League Baseball season so far and just how some teams are doing, and then talk about the NHL and NBA playoffs. Thanks for tuning in to Big Blue Sports Podcast this afternoon here on WCVF 88.9, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. Be right back.
Waiting for the sun to come, looking like a man who's on the run, hoping for a new day, sure is bound to come, and all the time you're asking what happened to the sun, sitting going nowhere.
talk on the radio.
If a song can make you smile,
If you like to listen in stereo,
up and down the county line,
have we got the station for you? WCPF 88.9.
Welcome back to Big Blue Sports Podcast. Before we get going, I just wanted to let you know that the Writers Ring is a club of writers here on campus. Anything from fantasy to poetry, from Gothic literature to fan fiction, from mystery to nonfiction. Bring something to write with and learn about the ways of writing, meet special guests, and hang out with us in the Fenton Reading Room on Mondays from 7 to 8 p.m. Writers Ring, definitely a great opportunity for anybody on campus interested in writing. I know a lot of writing majors will go there, and yeah, definitely a great, exciting opportunity on Mondays from 7 to 8 p.m. I also wanted to let you know that the final issue of the spring 2023 semester of The Leader printed today. Make sure to grab your copy. We got a lot of fantastic stories in this issue. It's a bit of a longer one, but definitely worth the read, and very, very excited about the final issue being printed this semester. So Major League Baseball is in full swing, pardon my lame pun there, and a few games are actually going on right now. Bottom of the seventh in Detroit, the Mets leading the Tigers 5-4. And they're actually playing a doubleheader today. This is the first game of a doubleheader. It was made up from yesterday, their game in Detroit. I think it got rained out. Their second game is later tonight at 6:40. Two other games, actually, are in action right now. Top of the fifth from Globe Life Field down in Arlington, Texas. The Arizona Diamondbacks leading the Texas Rangers 5-2. Rangers are off to a very impressive start, 18-11 on the season, 12-5 at home, and that's with Jacob deGrom being now placed on the injured list. Midway through the fifth, down in Houston, the San Francisco Giants and Houston Astros are scoreless. And then games later on today, as I don't think there were any games earlier today, there were not. So games later today, 4:10 at Dodger Stadium, the Dodgers hosting the Philadelphia Phillies. I know it was a big deal last night with the Phillies to get Bryce Harper back, and honestly kind of a surprising return too, considering the fact that he was out and needed surgery, and I honestly am surprised to see him back this early, and honestly, good for him. That's fantastic that he can make that return so quickly. That should be big help to a Phillies team that is 15-16 right now. Also at 4:10 out in San Diego, the Padres hosting the Cincinnati Reds. Couple games at 6:40 tonight. The Miami Marlins playing host to the Atlanta Braves. The Tigers, as I mentioned, hosting the Mets in the second half of their doubleheader. And then the Tampa Bay Rays hosting the Pittsburgh Pirates. Has there been a more pleasant surprise in Major League Baseball so far this year than the Pittsburgh Pirates? I mean, that team, they're 20-10, and they actually lost to the Rays yesterday. They're 20-10, 11-6 on the road. I mean, they've been truly outstanding. They've been really good so far this year. And I don't think that anybody coming into this season would have predicted that, a month in, the Pittsburgh Pirates are the top team in the National League, but that's the case right now. 7:05 tonight, a couple games. The Washington Nationals playing host to the Chicago Cubs, and the New York Yankees hosting the Cleveland Guardians. A couple games starting at 7:10. The Chicago White Sox, who are just off to an abysmal start, hosting the Minnesota Twins. And on the White Sox, I mentioned, I don't remember if I mentioned it on the show last week or not. I don't think I did, but there was a caller that called into a sports show in Chicago, and I think it was on ESPN Radio, who called into a sports show in Chicago and just vented his frustrations about the White Sox. And you could just tell the passion in his voice that this is just, it's killing that poor guy. I mean, to have to deal with a baseball team that's as inept as the White Sox are right now, it honestly reminded me of, if you can remember a couple years ago when the Sabres were, remember a couple years ago when the Sabres weren't playing well. That's been a couple of 10 or 11 years that they haven't been playing well. But I can remember it was February of 2020, I think, was when Dwayne Steinel called into WGR and just went off for like a solid 5 minutes, and every single Sabres fan completely related to his pain. It honestly reminded me very much of this. this poor guy, I'm like, geez, I mean, the White Sox really, though, they're 9-21, and this is a team that talent-wise, they should not be 9-21. There's absolutely no way. But, the argument that can be made is you're only 30 games into a 162-game season. There's a long way to go, a lot of base. It's a long ride between now and the beginning of October. So, yes, there is hope to turn it around, but you start 9-21, that's difficult to come back from. Also at 7:10 tonight, moving on past the White Sox, the Boston Red Sox playing host to the Toronto Blue Jays. 7:40 tonight on ESPN Plus, the Kansas City Royals hosting the Baltimore Orioles, who are off to a great start as well. 7:45 tonight, the St. Louis Cardinals playing host to the Los Angeles Angels. Shohei Ohtani is on the mound for the Angels tonight. So, as many listeners might be aware, I am a St. Louis Cardinals fan. That has not gone very well so far this year. I was just talking about the White Sox at 9-21. The St. Louis Cardinals, who are my favorite team, with Paul Goldschmidt, who won the National League MVP last year, Nolan Arenado, one of the best third basemen in the game today, if not the best, Wilson Contreras, supposed to be one of the best offensive catchers in the game, and all the talent they have, the Cardinals are 10-20. They're in last place in the National League Central, and this is a National League Central division that features the Cincinnati Reds, who have really struggled the last couple of years, and other teams like Chicago, who has not necessarily played great. They've been okay, but they're like dead last. They're tied for last in the National League, tied with the Rockies. And, it's hard because I know that, there's probably not many people who also follow the Cardinals around here. But, man, it has not been a great season so far. I mean, wow. Let me tell you, for anybody who wants to know what it's like to follow a baseball team who's 10-20 right now with a lineup that at the moment can't hit, and a rotation and bullpen that giving up less than 5 runs is a good day. It hasn't really been that fun. Honestly, it's not. But hopefully they'll turn it around. I don't know. Oh my gosh. Anyway, moving on, because then I'm just going to get sad about the Cardinals. 8:40 tonight, the Colorado Rockies hosting the Milwaukee Brewers, and then at 9:40 tonight, the Oakland A's hosting the Seattle Mariners. I guess that's the thing about the A's, is that, no matter how bad our baseball teams do, at least we are not Oakland A's fans. And A's fans, I feel for you. I really do, because everything that's been going on with them, and I have my own thoughts about that, and why not? Because I don't think that I am any stranger to going off on a tangent on this show. The whole situation with the A's possibly moving to Vegas is, in my mind, ridiculous. I think that it is so not fair to that Oakland fan base. This is an Oakland A's team that, first of all, it's a franchise who has won the World Series 9 times, which is the third most of any team in baseball behind the Yankees and Cardinals. This is an organization that has a very proud history. We know, they went to the World Series 3 years in a row, late 80s, early 90s. They won it in 89. This is the Moneyball team, with Billy Beane, 2002, winning 20 games in a row. They've been a good team in the past, and they have shown that their fan base is good. Their fan base is very passionate about their team. And yet, you have ownership of the Oakland A's who is, at least in my mind, trying to tank the team as badly as they can so that they can have an excuse to move them to Las Vegas. And you know what it reminds me of? If anybody has ever seen the movie Major League, that is exactly the situation. For anybody who's not familiar with Major League, the plot line in the movie is basically that it's centered around Cleveland's baseball team, which is now called the Guardians, formerly known as the Cleveland Indians. They were known as that at the time. And basically, the plotline of the movie is that Cleveland's owner passes away, and his daughter takes over control of the team. She doesn't want anything to do with Cleveland. She wants to move the team down to Miami where the weather's nicer and, she can make more money and all that sort of stuff. But the problem is that the lease with the stadium is such that the team can't be moved unless they finish last in attendance. So the plot line of the movie is basically that she completely guts the team and intentionally makes them horrible so that they can like have no fans come to their games, be terrible, and then move down to Miami. And then the movie, of course, ends with Cleveland with their kind of ragtag group of guys getting good. And they end up winning their first pennant in a handful of years. They beat the Yankees in the last scene of the movie. Willie Mays Hayes is one of my favorite. He was played by Wesley Snipes. Charlie Sheen is in the movie as well. And literally when I was first reading about the A's situation, I was like, oh my, this is Major League. This is literally Major League. It is ownership intentionally trying to tank a team so that they will have a case for saying, oh, our fans don't care. Our fans won't come to our games. We need to move the team to a market that's going to be better for us. And I feel bad for Oakland fans because if the A's do move, that will be their third team that they've lost in like the last 6 or 7 years. I mean, the Golden State Warriors didn't move that far. I mean, they only moved across the bay from Oakland to San Francisco, but like the Raiders moved. The Raiders, first of all, have moved in and out of Oakland like 3 times. You remember Al Davis moved them from Oakland to LA in the early 80s. Then they moved back to Oakland in the mid 90s, and now they're in Vegas. But I feel bad for Oakland fans because as a fan of I guess I'll say small market team, my team being relocated is quite literally one of my biggest fears. Like I have this is a 100% true story. I have woken up from nightmares about the Bills or Sabres leaving Buffalo. I'm completely serious. That's not even a joke. I have woken up from nightmares about the Bills and Sabres leaving Buffalo. And I've always been afraid of losing my teams because I see what these small market fan bases go through when their teams leave, and it's devastating. I mean, I am a St. Louis Cardinals fan. The St. Louis area is an area that I care about very much. I remember when the Rams left a few years ago and moved to LA, they were devastated. I mean, don't let anybody ever fool you into thinking that St. Louis was not a passionate football market. They loved that team. And it was horrible to see them have to lose and it's just awful. And it always worries me that we're going to lose the Bills or the Sabres, because what if there's ever ownership, questions? I remember back in 2014 when Ralph Wilson passed away, I remember there were rumors that somebody was going to buy the Bills and move them to Toronto or maybe move them to Los Angeles or somewhere else, move them out of Buffalo. And then thankfully, Terry and Kim Pagula bought the team and kept them here. And I've always heard stories about back in like 2002, 2003, when Sabres owner John Regas went to prison, there were questions about people possibly buying the Sabres and moving them elsewhere, moving them to Kansas City or Houston or Hamilton or wherever. It doesn't matter. If they're not here, I don't care where they are, So I feel so bad for the Oakland fans because this ownership group for the A's is trying to make it seem like the fans don't care. They're trying to create false apathy. And that is something that drives me insane when owners do that. They do that for new stadiums. They do that for relocation deals. Is they tank the team, they gut payroll, and then wonder why nobody is showing up to their team who's going to lose 110 games a year. Like, it's ridiculous. And the A's right now their management is being allowed to get away with that. And I think that's a huge, huge problem. I don't want to see the A's leave Oakland. Truth be told, I don't. It's nothing against Vegas, but I don't want to see the A's leave Oakland. Relocation in sports just bothers me. I just don't like it. I get it. Sometimes it makes business sense, but I don't like it. because I feel bad for those small town teams. I feel bad for those small town, small market teams who can't stay, those fans of those teams who pour everything they have into their teams, and then they move, and then there's nothing left. I've always heard about the impact that losing the Browns had on Cleveland. Now they got the Browns back, but that was still just devastating to them. And I just can't stand it when people, owners specifically, do that. And then people say, well, it was a justifiable move because the fan base didn't care anymore. The fan base didn't care anymore because you tanked the team and made it so they wouldn't care. What I've seen on social media a couple times, and then I got to get the break. I've seen a couple times that there were some A's fans that were talking about staging a reverse protest, which was like, you think about like a fan boycott is like when fans just don't go to the games. No. They're going to, some fans were like, we need to like sell out a whole bunch of games, and then management will have literally no case for moving the team. I think that would be awesome, and I would support A's fans in doing that because I don't think they're the Oakland A's. Come on. Like, they can't leave Oakland. They're the Oakland Athletics. Moneyball would be completely inaccurate without them. Come on. We got to keep the A's in Oakland. That's my opinion. We got to keep the A's in Oakland. Anyways, I'm going to get to break and then come back and talk about the NBA and NHL playoffs, and then later on talk about the NFL draft and what the Bills did. Thanks for indulging me on my baseball rant. I always have more than enough, feelings and opinions about professional sports. But then again, this is only an hour-long show, so I kind of have to dial back on some of those. But then sometimes I also go off on tangents, and it just causes things to be all sorts of fun. So thanks for tuning in to Big Blue Sports Podcast this afternoon. I greatly appreciate it. I'll be back in a moment on the Campus and Community Voice of Fredonia.
Stars that guide me on my way never see the light of day. The night is long, but this night is mine. And all the pain that led you there, to that island bound and bare, is no great match for the test of time. Floating through a wicked storm, I'm headed for your shore, on a boat that won't sink,
to News at Noon on Mondays and Wednesdays at noon, with an additional news segment on High Noon Friday, every Friday at noon. News at Noon gives you your local, campus, and international updates, as well as sports and weather. Be sure to tune in.
Welcome back to Big Blue Sports Podcast. On this day in local sports history, May 3rd, 1995. Let me tell you, this one was hard to find. May 3rd, 1995, defenseman Richard Smellick scores twice, and Wayne Primo scores in his NHL debut as the Sabres beat the Devils 5-4 in the lockout-shortened 94-95 regular season finale. And the Sabres would go on to lose to the Philadelphia Flyers in 5 games in the first round. And that was, let me do the quick math in my head, 28 years ago today on May 3rd, 1995. That one was hard to find. Let me tell you, I do this for every show, like a this day in Bills or Sabres, whatever, sports history. And usually I'll look back at like, okay, once it gets later in April, beginning of May, I'm like, all right, what old Sabres playoff games took place on this day, whatever. That one was hard. That was difficult to find. Anyway, speaking of the NHL playoffs, those are heating up and getting rather interesting. And the story of the playoffs so far has been the fact that the greatest team single season in the history of the NHL lost in the first round. And is it the greatest playoff upset of all time? It might be. The first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs are over. We are into round 2. 2 series are starting tonight. And I'll get to that in a moment. But first, I want to recap the first round. So in the Metropolitan Division, the division champ Carolina Hurricanes move on to round 2, beating the New York Islanders in 6 games. And they sealed that with a 2-1 overtime win in Game 6 last Friday. And then also in that division, the New Jersey Devils, after getting kind of steamrolled in games 1 and 2, come back to beat the Rangers in 7 games. They finished that off with a 4-0 win on Monday. The Devils advanced to round 2. Game 1 between New Jersey and Carolina is slated for 7 o'clock tonight on ESPN. In the Atlantic Division, we already know it's been the talk of the playoffs so far. The Boston Bruins, 65 games, 135 points, the most wins and points of any team in the regular season in the history of the NHL, and the Boston Bruins lose in 7 games in the first round. They had a 3-1 series lead, too, over the Florida Panthers, who, may I remind you all, finished 1 point ahead of the Buffalo Sabres. 1 point. That's all the Sabres missed the playoffs by. 1 point, and Buffalo's playing Boston. Would the Sabres have been able to pull off the same upset? Maybe. I don't know. But that just goes to show that you can never guarantee anything, especially in the NHL. A lot of people, when the Sabres missed the playoffs, said, you know what, it's good because they were just going to get smoked by Boston in the first round. No, you don't know that. You never know that. Everyone said back in 2019 that the Tampa Bay Lightning were going to roll over the Columbus Blue Jackets in the first round. They got swept. So you can never guarantee anything. And I think this just reaffirms that. I mean, Boston was up 3-1. Most successful regular season team in NHL history. And they still lose the series. They lost in 7 games. Game 7 overtime at home. Carter Verhaeghe scores. Florida wins at 4-3. And all 3 Florida regulation goals were scored by former Sabres. But that's beside the point. There's been a lot of Sabres in the playoffs, which makes Buffalo fans even more sad than they already are. A team that is somewhat known for not coming through in the playoffs, but did this year, is the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Leafs win their first playoff series since 2004. 19 years. They win their first playoff series as they beat the Tampa Bay Lightning in 6 games. They sealed it with a 2-1 overtime win in Game 6. John Tavares scored the OT winner. And Toronto facing Florida in the second round. I almost said first round. In the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Game 1 was last night, and Florida actually won that game. Both road teams won last night. Florida at Toronto. Game 2 is slated for tomorrow night at 7 o'clock on TNT. And I'm looking here on ESPN The cheapest tickets you can get to that game are like $200. Holy smokes, that's unbelievable. I get it, it's playoffs, but come on. That's like you wonder why Leafs fans always invade opposing arenas. It's because they have to pay an arm and a leg to get tickets in Toronto. Holy cow, that's like actually unbelievable. In the Western Conference, in the Central Division, the defending Stanley Cup champions are defending no more. The Colorado Avalanche get knocked out by the Seattle Kraken in 7 games in round 1. Seattle wins their first playoff series in franchise history in just their second year of existence, and the Kraken this year become the first team in NHL history to win their first ever playoff series against the defending Stanley Cup champions. So no doubt, congrats to them. They look like they might go on a special run. In the other series in the Central, the Dallas Stars move on to round 2 with a 6-game series win over the Minnesota Wild. They sealed it with a 4-1 win in Minnesota in Game 6. Seattle and Dallas played last night, and the Kraken actually won that game. Game 2 between those two teams is slated for 9:30 tomorrow night on TNT. In the Pacific Division, Jack Eichel, everyone's favorite ex-Buffalo Sabre. Again, if you can sense my sarcasm, it's because I'm laying it on rather thick. The Golden Knights beat the Winnipeg Jets in 5 games. They sealed that with a 4-1 win on Thursday, April 7th, not 22nd. And the Golden Knights advanced to round 2. And then the other series in that division, the Edmonton Oilers beat the Los Angeles Kings in 6 games, a 5-4 win in Los Angeles in Game 6. And Game 1 between the Oilers and Golden Knights in Vegas is tonight at 9:30, that game on ESPN. And let me tell you, the Colorado Avalanche, honestly, are fortunate that Boston also lost, because the memes and hilarity would be completely focused on them if they had lost to Seattle if Boston had won. I mean, everyone would be clowning the Avs, but nobody's paying attention to that because Boston losing in the first round is maybe the greatest upset in the history of the NHL playoffs. Mathematically, it actually is, because it was the point differential between Boston and Florida. It was like the largest point differential in an upset in the history of the playoffs. Like, Boston was like 42 points better than Florida, or 43, I think. Or I think it was 42. Yeah, because Florida had 93. But, like, that's just crazy. The fact that I still, like, that happened, a few days ago, and I still can't believe that Florida actually won that series. That's incredible. And more unbelievable, Toronto won a playoff series. I can't believe that happened. Now, the unfortunate part of that is that with the Leafs winning, that means that the Sabres now have the longest playoff series win drought in the NHL, in addition to the longest playoff drought. Please end both of those soon, Buffalo, because, yeah, just please. And the other thing that I noticed, and then I'll move on to the NBA, the other thing that I noticed is that it's been a long time since any of these teams won the Cup. I mean, all the teams that are remaining, out of all 8 teams, 3 of them have never won the Cup. Vegas, Seattle, and Florida have never won the Cup. Seattle's never been in the finals. And then you've got Toronto hasn't won the Cup since 1967. Edmonton, not since 1990. Dallas, not since 1999. New Jersey, not since 2003. Carolina, not since 2006. So either way, we're going to get a team that wins their first Stanley Cup or wins their first Stanley Cup in a long time. So I think that's kind of cool, actually, and it goes to show that parity does still exist, and maybe the reign of the Tampa Bay Lightning is over. Maybe. Hopefully from a fellow Atlantic Division team. I don't know. Maybe. Anyways, moving on to the NBA, because their playoffs are heating up as well. The second round matchups are already underway. In the Western Conference, in the first round, the Denver Nuggets, the top seed, beat the Minnesota Timberwolves in 5 games. The Phoenix Suns beat the 4-seed Suns beat the 5-seed LA Clippers in 5. The 6-seed Golden State Warriors were able to pull it off, beating the 3-seed Sacramento Kings in 7. And the 7-seed Los Angeles LeBrons, I guess I should call them the Lakers, but I call them the LeBrons, upset the 2-seed Memphis Grizzlies in 6 games. In the East, the Miami Heat pull off the upset over the top seed Milwaukee Bucks, winning in 5 games. The 5-seed New York Knicks beat the 4-seed Cleveland Cavaliers in 5 games. And I'm a little excited about that. I am a New York Knicks fan. The Philadelphia 76ers sweep the 6-seed Brooklyn Nets, and the 2-seed Boston Celtics beat the 7-seed Atlanta Hawks in 6 games. Second round matchups between the top seed Nuggets and the 4-seed Phoenix Suns. Game 3 is Friday night at 10 o'clock on ESPN in Phoenix. Denver leading that series 2-0. And then the other series is the 6 versus 7. How about that? The Golden State Warriors against Los Angeles Lakers. Game 2 tomorrow night at 9 o'clock on ESPN at Golden State. The Lakers took Game 1 in that series. We have a game tonight as well. Game 2 in Boston between the Celtics and the 76ers at 8 o'clock on TNT. Philadelphia won Game 1. And then the Knicks versus Heat. Game 3 is Saturday afternoon at 3:30 on ABC down in Miami. That series is tied at a game apiece. So that's a look at your NHL and NBA playoffs. Going to take another quick break. And then when I come back, I'm going to talk all about the NFL draft, what the Bills did, and what I think their picks mean for their season moving forward. Thanks for tuning in this afternoon on WCVF FM Fredonia, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. Be right back in just a few.
automatic voice message system. At the tone, please record your message.
Hey, I'm just calling to let you know that you're listening.
So welcome back to Big Blue Sports Podcast. It was an interesting draft. The draft was, of course, last Thursday night, the first round, second round, and third rounds on Friday, and then 4 through 7 Saturday. It was an interesting draft. In the first round, there were some surprises, not a ton of huge stunners, but in it definitely overall very interesting draft. Bryce Young goes first overall to the Carolina Panthers, as I think most people probably expected he would. Houston pulling off an interesting move. They took C.J. Stroud at 2, and then with their other first-round pick, they actually traded up to the third pick to take Will Anderson Jr. And you know what? Why not? They're a young team. They're building. Why not try and add as much young talent as possible? The Colts take Anthony Richardson at 4. The other interesting picks, Jalen Carter falls to 9 to the Philadelphia Eagles. The Falcons take Bijan Robinson with the 8th pick. The Lions were doing some interesting things. They took Alabama running back Jahmyr Gibbs 12th overall, and then Iowa linebacker Jack Campbell 18th. Definitely some interesting picks. Oregon defensive back Christian Gonzalez falls to the Patriots at 17. A solid pick for them. And then we had a run of wide receivers in the early 20s. The Seahawks selected the guy that I kind of wanted the Bills to take, who is Ohio State wide receiver Jackson Smith-Njigba, who was selected 20th overall by the Seahawks. And then the receivers started to fly off the board. The Chargers took TCU's Quentin Johnson with the 21st pick. Boston College's Zay Flowers was taken by Baltimore at 22. And then the Minnesota Vikings took USC's Jordan Addison at 23. Now, the Ravens taking a first-round wide receiver is, I think, a commitment to Lamar Jackson. I said last week that I didn't think Lamar was going to play another down for the Ravens, and then 2 days later signs an extension with them. Shows how much I know, of course. But I think the Ravens really are making a commitment. I think they're saying to Lamar, okay, we are going to make more of a commitment to developing your passing game by drafting Zay Flowers, by signing Odell Beckham Jr. The Ravens are trying, I think, to make a commitment to Lamar being a more well-rounded quarterback, and that was his main kind of complaint, is that he didn't really have too many great receivers that were surrounding him, and that's why he was kind of looking at leaving. But Lamar definitely got a sizable payday. He will remain a Baltimore Raven. The Bills selection at 25. It stumped some people. They traded up and gave up a 4th-round pick to move up 2 spots and select Utah tight end Dalton Kincaid. Now, a lot of people were shocked, honestly, when they took Dalton Kincaid, thinking, why do we need a tight end? We already have Dawson Knox. Here's the thing about that. Dalton Kincaid is a phenomenal pass catcher. He's very good at attacking over the middle, which was something that the Bills at times struggled with last year. I would imagine they may run a lot of 2 tight end sets with both Kincaid and Knox on the field at the same time. And if you think Dawson Knox feels like he's being threatened, he doesn't, because Dawson Knox literally called Kincaid right after the selection, talking about how pumped he was and excited to have him on the team. Dalton Kincaid, I'm not going to say that he's going to be exactly this way, but Dalton Kincaid has been compared by some scouts to Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce. If he can be even a little bit as good as Travis Kelce, that's a home run pick at 25. That's a phenomenal selection. The Bills wanted this guy. He was their guy. They ended up giving up a 4th-round pick to move up 2 spots and go get him. In the 2nd round, with the 59th overall pick, they selected Florida guard Osiris Torrance. Now, I think this is a phenomenal selection. I was honestly thinking about should the Bills maybe take Torrance with their 1st-round pick. I didn't think there was any chance that Osiris Torrance would fall to them in round 2. I think this guy is a really good guard. He started 11 games for the Florida Gators last year, and he was an All-American. This is a guy who is going to help out your interior offensive line. Overall, the Bills need help on the O-line. They desperately need it, and I think they got it with this pick. In the 3rd round, they made an interesting selection. They took Tulane linebacker Dorian Williams. It's an interesting pick. I don't know too much about him, but I have heard that, I think he's got decent speed for a linebacker. So I think that there is definitely some optimism with him being a relatively solid option. Then the Bills started making a couple trades. They ended up trading. They traded down a couple times, got some future mid to late round picks. They selected in the 5th round with the 150th overall pick, Florida wide receiver Justin Shorter. I remember when this guy was recruited. He started out at Penn State. He was the number 1 overall receiver in the 2018 high school graduate class. I remember this guy from then thinking that he was going to be like one of the best receivers in college football. Didn't quite pan out that way, but still he had a nice career at Florida. I think this is a really nice pick. I think Justin Shorter is going to be a very good depth wide receiver option for the Bills. I think this was a very smart pick by Brandon Beane. Then they made another trade down, a couple more trades acquiring just some later picks. As they traded their 6th round pick in exchange for a 7th round pick and a 2024 6th round pick. And they actually did that twice. In the 7th round, they had 2 picks. With their first 7th round pick, they selected Ole Miss guard Nick Broker. Broker started 23 games at left tackle in college. Last year, he was a second-team All-SEC at left guard on a very good Ole Miss team. And then with their other 7th-round pick, the Bills selected Oregon State cornerback Alex Austin, who was a 4-year starter. And I think a lot of people were really, really excited about him, thought that he was going to be pretty good. And, of course, the Bills yesterday making news, signing defensive tackle Poona Ford in free agency. And personally, I think that's a fantastic signing. Absolutely phenomenal signing to get Poona Ford. Listen, the Bills' defensive line, especially the interior defensive line, when Von Miller went down on Thanksgiving last year, there was such a difference on that D-line. They couldn't get pressure on anybody, especially up the middle. That's been my biggest complaint about the Bills, is that they need to be better in the trenches. They were not good enough on the line, offensively or defensively. Their offensive line did not do a good job of protecting Josh Allen last year, and their defensive line did a horrible job of getting to the quarterback, just simply put. So my hope is that with the acquisitions they've made, these guys will be able to make an impact. I think they're really trying some things on the offensive line. I mean, they've really improved the guard spot, both guard spots on the offensive line. I've really been feeling like Deion Dawkins did not have a good season last year. That's for sure. But I feel like that, honestly, was kind of an outlier. He's usually better than he was last year. So my hope is that he'll have a rebound season. Mitch Morse, I think, is a very solid center. You know, you brought in Connor McGovern and David Edwards. You drafted 2 guards this year as well. Of course, most notably Osiris Torrance. You've also got Ryan Bates. You can't forget about Bates. At right tackle, that's worrying me a little bit. The Bills, I think, are really trying to give Spencer Brown a chance. Spencer Brown had an atrocious year last year. He was absolutely horrible on the offensive line. I like the guy. I really, really do. I want him to do well. But you also have to realize that you are in a win-now window, and you can't afford to have guys not be coming through, especially when you've got the most valuable player on your team and number 17 behind him. You've got to be able to keep Josh Allen well protected, got to be able to avoid him taking those hits. Defensively, I think the D-line got a little better. I think they're really banking on Von Miller making a significant impact, and I think they really are going to need Greg Rousseau to take a significant step forward as well. The interior defensive line, we got to see more from Ed Oliver. We do. We got to see more from him. Daquan Jones, I think, is a good guy to have around as well. I think Poona Ford is an outstanding acquisition. And overall, I think that next year they have a chance to contend for a Super Bowl again. But it's all going to come down to how these guys can come through, especially in the games that are most important. So that'll do it for this afternoon's episode of Big Blue Sports Podcast. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, as well as everybody here at Fredonia Radio Systems who makes this show possible. All Things Considered, presented by National Public Radio, is up next from 4 to 6. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Have a good one.